Great morning, world. Great morning, friends. This is your boy, Dr. JC Doornick, aka The Dragon, and welcome to another Make Sense Mondays, which is a once a week version of the Make Sense podcast. Make Sense with Dr. JC Dornick podcast, but it's live, which means that anything can happen. So if you tune in live, you're going to get a bunch of things. You're going to get the chance to see mistakes right, that happen when it's live, because what we do is we always clean this up, polish it up for the podcast, and maybe even the YouTube channel. But the purpose of Make Sense Mondays is to just help you, rather than just letting your regularly scheduled program boot up. And remember something: when your program boots up, great morning, Chris. When your program boots up, where is that program coming from? Yesterday, which probably no longer applies and serves you, right? We're going to talk a little bit about that today. So rather than letting your program boot up, which has been given to you by an external force, what we're going to do is reclaim control, take command, become the shot caller, the dominant force and creator of our life today. So welcome to Make Sense Mondays. Great morning, Vicky. So today we're going to make sense of making the shift from can't to can. And I'm just super fascinated. And that's what Make Sense Mondays is about. It's about taking these topics or the things that make you go, and just looking at them and saying, why do some people have this, or at least why do I have the perception that some people have this ability to exude confidence and clarity and seem to be motivated and push through and do hard things when, I struggle. So that's what it means to shift from that, idea of I can't to can. So I'm just really, really fascinated with human behavior in general, but this powerful distinction, because if you think about it, it's a really simple thing. This powerful distinction and shift that happens when we just simply learn how to remove an apostrophe and a T from the word can't, which then leaves us with this potentially most powerful word that a human being can embrace, and that would be the word can. I guess the motivation for this topic comes from a lot of people will ask me how I always seem to push forward and do hard things and persevere and seem to be motivated and certain. And then also just this idea of how you can see two people have the same opportunity, come from the same backgrounds, and one of them goes ahead and does those things and the other one retreats. So just as a disclaimer, I just want to share with everybody, because there's no sense in bullshitting. I'm just as scared and anxious and, nervous about going forward and doing hard things as you. And the reason why is because just like you, I'm human and I have a brain that overthinks and is still tethered and caught up in the past and worried about the future, just like you, no different. And this perception that will one day not happen is really, really silly. It's somewhat foolish to think. I think that we get in this idea of seeing people up on stage, or we listen to podcasts and we don't hear that disclaimer, and we create this perception that there's this place that we can go to where adversity no longer happens. So I just want everybody to know that it's about having structure and systems and tools to actually execute on this idea of changing the way that you look at things so that the things you look at change. So today, we're not just going to talk about this topic. I'm going to give you some actual action steps that you too can use to practice this stuff, because it's just a matter of, recognizing the Hebbian theory of, nerves that fire together, wire together. So if you're right now in this place where you don't believe in yourself, or you don't think you can do things, that's totally normal. You've just allowed that to be your current reality, So just as you created that reality, you'll be able to create a new one. Great morning, Susan. So remember, in Make Sense Mondays, although that we're going to have the opportunity, because we're streaming all over the place, which is very scary. because who knows what's going to happen. But I like to do scary things. But we're in it, Facebook, we're in YouTube, we're on LinkedIn. So please do me a favor, do yourself a favor, and interact. Great morning, Kathy. It might not show up in the finished product, but I love answering questions. I have this very, very unique uh, talent, just like you have talents, where I do best when I'm on the fly. So if anybody has a comment or a question or anything like that, you will do nothing but enrich your day and the conversation. So let's look at this idea of shifting from can't to can, which is really just an apostrophe and a T, right? But there's a lot more to it. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about what I wrote this morning. And then as a side note, we all have our own ways of getting into a more confident state and more clear state, because you can't just assume that may or may not happen. So there's something that you do that can do that. For me, it's exercise, it's focusing on my diet, but it's also reading and writing. So I'm sharing with you right now something that I wrote this morning about this topic. And just know that the act of writing it and sharing it with you is how I get confident and certain. So you can't just sit back and listen to something and know it and grow it, right? You have to actually put it into action. So if you learn something today, please consider, selfishly for yourself and the sake of others, if you learn something today, give it away, take it and share it with somebody else. Share this video right now, push the share button. As soon as you find something of value that makes you go, wow, you would be very, very well served in sharing it with other people. It's almost like a moral obligation, but then also taking the information and making an attempt to explain it and making it your own. So if you learn something today, give it away. That's how it's going to stay. It's giver's gain. Okay. So it's another one. This topic's another one of those things, like the idea that I very often say is, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Everybody loves that idea. So yeah, if I change the way I look at things, if I gain a new perspective of something, then things will start to change. Because the truth is, whatever you think is real and you call reality, you're right. Whether I think it's the same thing or not, whatever you think you see is what you see. So it's really silly when we go, you are mistaken. If you walk up to me right now and you look up at the sky and you see what I call the sun and you tell me it's the moon, I'm going to say, interesting. But I'm not going to tell you you're wrong because you think you're right. So sit in that space right now and remember that concept of, if you change the way you look at things, maybe say, well, maybe it's not the moon, maybe it's the sun. See, that's what we struggle with most, is we're in our own way by putting exclamation points at the end of sentences. So in this environment, in Make Sense Mondays, as well as our Make Sense Academy, which is the private community that we have where we work on this stuff every day, I'll talk a little bit more about that. We say things like maybe, might be, I don't know, I'm not certain, because you're being brought up in a world, especially in the personal growth, self-development world, where you're being led to believe, because I know this, because I feel this as well, that if you're not certain about things, then you're not capable of winning. See, I think the most powerful thing you could ever do is not be certain, to be certain about that. Because as soon as you put an exclamation point at the end of anything, there's no room for growth, right? Isn't that funny? So the idea of, if you change the way you look at things, things you look at change. When you read it and agree with it, however, struggle to execute it. We're going to talk about executing on something like that today. So let me just share with you a little bit about what I wrote this morning, because I think it's going to be very powerful for you. And then we're going to take some action steps. So when I look at my shift, my own personal shift, which is the only one I really know best, and I don't even know that one great, from can't to can, I can see that those two words, here's what's interesting. Can't and can, whenever I look at my moments of saying, I can't do that, or I can do that. And recently I've found myself saying, I can't do that, and worrying about things and experiencing things like anxiety and depression and things like that, just like everybody else. So what I notice is that the version of me that says I can't and I can are two different versions of myself. So what's interesting about that is that makes me say, well, maybe there's something about state management, about doing things that leverage the version of myself that says that I can. So let's go further. The can't version used the apostrophe and the T as excuses. This is what I notice about myself. The apostrophe and the T making can't as excuses to remove himself, right? This is my can't version from responsibility, as well as the version of myself that had such a low self esteem that I always tried to be right. Isn't that interesting? The version of myself that always tries to be right ends up nipping me in the bud because sometimes I try to be right about the fact that I can't do something or that I'm screwed. You see, there's that exclamation point. Sometimes I like to play this game and say, "Oh, I'm screwed financially," or something like that, and just remove the exclamation point and put a question mark, say, "I'm screwed," and dispute it and question it. So you can't do that. Nobody can do that. I can't do that. Well, if that's true, if nobody can do something, maybe you should consider being nobody today. Not frequently, the can't version, not frequently using words like maybe or might be. Do you have the ability to say maybe or might be? Or have you been programmed to think that that's a sign of weakness? So I lived in the extremities of consideration. That was the can't version. So I was either can or can't. That's another interesting thing is there's a middle ground where you consider both. See, if I question whether or not I can do something, question it rather than say it, I'm living in the middle ground. So I also find myself foolishly living in the extremities of I can and I can't. Because there's another interesting concept that if I am just so certain exclamation point that I can do something that I can't do, isn't that kind of the same thing? So I like to sit in the middle. The Buddhists call it the middle way of just questioning everything, right? I don't feel the need anymore in my life to be right. See, if you look at the nature of a scientist doesn't need to be right. A scientist wants to know what is right. They're always checking the facts, and we're going to learn how to do that. So nothing in between. I lived in the extremities. So it makes perfect sense that I was completely oblivious to the underlying forces that made me that way. So this is an interesting step when we go, well, why am I that way? Why do I have this negative outlook on life? Why do I find myself getting tethered to this idea that I can't do it and having self-esteem and confidence issues and things like that? Is that just the way I am? I'll challenge you right now to acknowledge and recognize that you haven't always been that way. All of a sudden, something happened, and you'll look to say, "Well, it was COVID, or this happened to me in my life." But it goes deeper than that. There's this outside, extrinsic, outside in programming and wiring of your brain, because remember, this is all stuff that's firing off from your brain by what I call your MFTPSE. And that comes from my book, soon to be published, Makes Sense, Solving the Mystery of Why Shit Happens. So MFTPSE means your mother, father, teacher, preacher. Those are part of your programmers, but it also includes society, right? What we consume with regularity ends up being what we assume with regularity. You're consuming this right now, whether you're watching it as a video, listening as a podcast, or live. You're consuming this. Be aware that what you consume ends up being what you assume. So now this would be a healthy thing for you to consume. But when you start scrolling reels and there's an algorithm that's programmed to know how to manipulate you, just understand that plays into it. So that's the S, the society in MFTPSE. And then there's evolution. Remember that evolutionary, natural selection, we've been passed, everything's been passed on and paid forward from things that happened that are no longer relevant many, many, many years ago. You have concepts, beliefs, thoughts, and feelings associated with things that no longer exist that have been passed on, like the idea of leaving your cave as a caveman and getting killed by some sort of saber-toothed tiger, right? You guys have refrigerators now. You live in houses and you can lock the door, but still we get scared. And it just shows up in different ways. Maybe it's money, maybe it's concerns about other things. So it's important to acknowledge that it's not your fault. You've been programmed from the outside in. So, regardless of what you actually thought, right, we have a tendency, and I do too, of allowing ourselves to think that our potential and opportunities were subject to our circumstances. Do you ever feel that way? Do you ever feel like, yeah, in a perfect world, Dragon, that would be fine, but my circumstances dictate that, I can't do that. Do you find yourself, I'll give you an example rather than questioning you. If I ever feel myself getting worried or concerned about money, for instance, I'm the dominant force of my life. I can make a decision right now to change my reality. But if I get tethered to the idea that I'm having a bad time, do you ever see that you also build this story of your circumstances that dictate why you're having a bad time, right? Because if you took radical responsibility, you can see it happening everywhere. You can change your reality right now. But if you're not ready to do that, or you're afraid of doing that, you'll get tethered to this idea that your circumstance dictates that you cannot do that. So just take a look at that. That's an important thing for you to acknowledge. Thank you for being a guest for the Parenting Summit for Non-for-Profit Learning Idiom. Interesting. Yes, that's right. So it's a matter of reprogramming and rewiring your mind. You so this is your I can mind. Remember, there's different versions of it. Your I can mind is just as viable and available. This is another interesting thing, is if you're in this negative, low confidence, low self-esteem version of your brain, that's just one viable version of your brain. Remember, there's extremities. So the I can version of your brain is just as viable and just as available as the I can't version. So it's really a question of what you want. So I believe that one of the biggest challenges that we have is that people very often just don't know what they want. And why would you refrain from just saying, here's what I want, and dreaming big and all of that stuff? That's how powerful your I can't is you will not allow yourself to just simply dictate what you want because of this fact that you don't think you can have things. Why wouldn't you just go back to the way things were when you were a child and foolishly allow yourself to just dream big? You want to be an astronaut? You want to be a professional athlete or whatever? Why would you not even consider what it would be like to do that by just saying, I want this? You're allowed to want. And that version of your brain is just as accessible, viable, and attainable as the version that says that they can't do anything. Okay. So it's a matter of reprogramming and rewiring your brain, right? So tell a lie big enough. This is an interesting quote. I want to see if anybody knows whose quote this is. Tell a lie big enough, loud enough, and long enough. This is about conditioning. Tell a lie big enough, long enough, and loud enough, and sooner or later, people will believe you. Whose quote is that? So in the chat, we'll clean that up for the podcast. But does anybody know whose quote that is? Tell a lie big enough, loud enough, and long enough, and sooner or later, everybody will believe you. Well, in case you didn't know, that is from Hitler. Okay, not a great dude. Perhaps you should consider taking this approach with your mind and let that sink in. Think about that for a second. Why don't you consider telling your brain a lie? And the only reason you would even call it a lie is because in the moment you think it's a lie because you're thinking on the other side, right? Why wouldn't you allow yourself to tell your brain that you can? What's the downside of it? Do you think somebody's going to show up and give you a speeding ticket or something like that? So think about this for a second. I shared this with my daughter this morning because we were watching a TV show, and somebody was smoking a cigarette, and I just wanted to know what she thought about it because my daughter's pretty chill. She's got a level head. So think about the first time. I don't know if anybody here has ever smoked or you do smoke. Great morning, Paula. Think about the first time that somebody takes a drag from a cigarette. right? Even though you look at it, you're like, oh, that's disgusting. Maybe you're at a party and you have this silly moment. And that first time you take a drag from a cigarette, what happens next is you cough and say it's the worst thing that you've ever experienced and you'll never do it again. However, 10 minutes later, when the nicotine hits, your brain has the ability, the potential, might not be you, to say, "Hmm, maybe I should try that again." And then later find yourself addicted to something that you once deemed disgusting and awful. So here's what I want you to see in that: humans can become addicted to even the worst things in the world. So I think we could also learn how to take some action steps and become addicted to believing that we can do things. Do you? Right? If you can become addicted to like substance abuse and things like that, and maybe you say, oh, but those are different because they have addictive qualities. Well, I can tell you one thing: being positive and optimistic, I can tell you firsthand, is very, very addicting, to the point where you can be overly positive and optimistic. That's why I don't live in the extremes anymore. But why not get addicted to it? Right. So let's take the first step and quickly understand, this is important, how we have become subjectified. Write that word down: subjectified. Take that word with you today, and you can dispute things and say, have I become subjectified? Why we've become subjectified to the idea that we can't do something, because it's actually not your fault. So let's look into that. If you're subjectified by something or someone, you could be subjectified to something or someone. It means that it's below the radar of your consciousness and it has you. So if you're subjectified by this idea that you can't do something, you actually believe you can't because it's under your radar of consciousness and it has you. And that's why you might say something like, you don't understand, my situation is different. And you try to validate it with an exclamation point. Hey, Anna, thanks so much for helping my daughter with her project. You're such a sweetie. Great to see you. Great morning. So it's something that has you. And this is what most people struggle with their emotional mismanagement of life and the things that happen to them. So think about what emotional mismanagement means. It just reminds us, and this is an important thing to recognize. You'll see when the action steps come up. It reminds us that we can't control things that happen. We can only control how we respond. So if you're having emotional mismanagement issues, all it means is that you're not subject to things that happen. You're just responding to them ineffectively. It's the very reason that I wrote my book and I created what's called the interface response system. And I built, with my wife and our partner, Jules, we built this thing called the Make Sense Academy, which gives everybody, for almost nothing, the ability to work on this stuff. Your stress response system, but we call it your interface response system, to have a more efficient and effective and logical and rational response to things. That's how you execute on changing the way you look at things. So the things that you look at change, but you have to decide that you want things to change first, don't you? Okay. So an example of what I'm talking about that would be something that's happened to me and so many people. Something they call it a childhood happening, where parents get divorced, right? And maybe one of your parents, your mother or your father, leaves you at home, right? And then it exposes you. At the time, you don't understand how far reaching this could be, but it exposes you to this idea that parents staying together and living at home is not a sure thing. Boom, concept, nerves firing. Now, if you just forgot about that day and you went along your merry way and you didn't support that concept and build more nerves firing together until it becomes an actual thing, right? You would be fine. But that's not what we do. We practice those thoughts. We practice that idea. How do we practice it? We start telling our story. What story are you telling yourself about yourself? Because that's wiring that story in. So you go through life and you suffer with abandonment issues. Any abandonment issue people out there? Do you want to join me? We'll have an abandonment cocktail party. So you suffer with abandonment issues because you are subject to this. Remember, subjective. You are subject to this happening, and therefore you have created a concept. Why am I sharing this with you right now? Because if you're locked into this idea that you can't do something, I'm just going to invite you to do a little bit of research and check the facts on that. And maybe your first step will be to go identify, where did that start? Who told you that? Who told you that? Because to be honest with you, if you really get deeply entrenched in reality and life right now, nothing's proven, right? So that means everything's open to you're subject to challenging and disputation and negotiation. So the first step to healing and reclaiming control of such an unconscious behavior, remember it's your program, it's running on autopilot, would be to identify this subjective concept or this lie, this story that you're telling yourself, right? And here's what it might be. My father left us, so marriage is a farce, and dads let you go, let you down and objectify it by actually taking a look at it, right? Objectify and dispute that concept once you identify it by actually taking a look at it rather than just accepting it, handing the keys of trust over to your concept and accepting it. Grab that happening, pull it up like you put it up on a screen, unpack it and pull it into view and just simply check the facts. I teach a concept in my book called holographic vision, meaning take a look at everything, walk around the thing, take a look at it from different angles, from all sides, and evaluate that the underlying circumstances, that are there are potentially a farce that you've just bought into, and evaluate where all parties were in their realities at that time. See, when we quickly, irrationally, stress response system, knee jerk response, experience something or someone or something that somebody says, what we do is we don't take the time to actually check the facts in it, and it boom, it sets up and it starts to wire into our brain. And then 20 years later, you're telling people that you can't do something. You understand? That's why it's not your fault, but we can rewire the brain. So you'd see that story that you created causing you to mismanage your emotions when it comes to, say, abandonment, right? You'd see where it came from. So maybe dads are actually great. Here's the maybe word. Maybe, might be that dads are great and strong marriages can last the test of time, which is what I'm experiencing right now because I allowed myself to. If both parties could just become more aware and conscious of where they are at any given time. It's a matter of becoming more conscious. So this allows us to now take something that happened to us and grab control of that rather than just allowing it to grab control of us and sculpted us, right? They took control of us and sculpted, but unpack it so that we can actually become free with it. But why would you go and do that? Because what it is that you're going after on the other side is sexy and it's exciting. So you do have to make a decision right now that you want to stop suffering and acknowledge why and what the value is of it. So this is part of what I call the make sense process and the interface response system, which is what we teach and practice every day in the Make Sense Academy. That's the sponsor of the Make Sense podcast. It is the coolest thing in the world. And just imagine getting coached not only by me, but my wife and our business partner, Jules, and learning everything and taking all of our online courses and having real live collaborative, sessions like this on a daily basis for $24 a month. That's the Make Sense Academy. So if you're interested in that, just say the word community and we'll send you an invite. And if you don't like it, we'll give you your $24 back. So this is part of the Make Sense process interface response system. It's a matter of taking a few simple steps to unveil that you're just telling yourself a story, right? That no way serves you. Can you acknowledge when you say, I can't? Can you ask yourself in that moment if that apostrophe and that T are serving you? Now, if you do say, yes, they're serving me because I'm keeping myself away from harm, or I don't feel like it right now, or my confidence is low, yes, that is a version of how it would serve you. But is it serving what you ultimately want? Remember, you have to be able to decide what you want. You have to allow yourself to decide. So here are a couple of action steps that you can do quickly to identify it. So first, locate the behavior or the feeling that you're having that's not serving you. Locate the behavior or the feeling that's not serving you. Second, just learn how to simply dispute and challenge where you developed that concept and what actually happened. That might free you alone. Say, that's not my concept. Somebody handed that to me. Check the facts, right? Not your story about it. Don't check the facts of how you explain it. Look at it from all sides holographically. So that's step 2. And then step 3, identify how this event that you just now identified doesn't justify the concepts that you've created, and become open to the possibilities of greatness, right? Isn't that crazy? Now, the reason why I say it's not your fault, especially in the first 7 years of your life, is your brain in its formative years was forming, and you just accepted everything as real. And then that cascaded later on in life to anything that you heard that validated what you were trained to think. You just bought into it. And now you find yourself running with different political views and religious views and communities that all support what it is that you were trained to think, right? Wouldn't it be cool if you learned how to think what you want to think, or look at things and just say what's rational and logical? That's what it means to become the dominant force of your life. Great community to be part of. Thank you, Paula. She's in the Make Sense Academy. So remember this, it's always easier to say no to things that don't serve you when there's a deeper yes inside. I want you to focus on the deeper yes inside. As long as you genuinely desire growth, I know that you can rationally say, of course I desire growth. But if you genuinely desire growth and happiness, saying yes to that is way more powerful and desirable to the other side of saying no and I can't. So you got to be able to see that you have that deeper yes inside. Do you have a deep yes inside? I sure do. And I know you do. You just have to allow yourself to acknowledge it. So let's talk a little bit about confidence, and I'll give you some action steps. Confidence, certainty, and self-worth are directly connected with this new version of yourself. So if you look into the future at this new version of I can, right? Or even the version that sits in the middle and says maybe, this new version of yourself, has connected to it confidence and certainty. And that version of yourself believes that they can do great things. You know that you have that version of yourself. What I like to do with myself when I run in the morning, in the beginning of my run, it's a good analogy. In the beginning, I don't feel that version of myself. But then all of a sudden, call it runner's high or whatever, all of a sudden, boom, that version shows up. And I always say to myself, I go, there he is. There he is. And I see that in my clients that I coach, and also the people in the Make Sense Academy. Whenever I see somebody come into themselves or their deeper yes, I always go, there she is. Wouldn't that be cool if I was able to look at you and say that? There she is. So that's the version that believes they can do great things. So those things, confidence, certainty, and self-worth, are like muscles. Whenever you're training a muscle, these things are just like muscles: confidence, certainty, and self-worth, just like muscles that need to be developed in your daily actions. You see, right now you're in a state, I know he's right. Change the way I look at things, things you look at change. There is a difference between can't and can, and I know that there's a difference between me and I have a deeper yes, but we have to develop these things like muscles. So muscles can either be developed and strong as a result of demanding from your muscles. That's what it means to lift weights, for instance, demanding action from them and developing them. Or they could be flaccid and weak from not demanding action from them. So why do I say if you learn something today, give it away? That's how it's going to stay. I'm offering you the ability to demand action from yourself right now and develop these things like confidence, self-worth, and certainty, right? Otherwise, they'll be flaccid. However, they are still there, muscles. Even if you don't use these things, confidence, certainty, and self-worth, it doesn't matter. They're still inside of you, like the deeper yes. But if you don't develop them, you'll never get to see them like a muscle. Okay. By training, I mean taking radical action steps that can, and consistency, or with consistency over time, no matter what. No matter what, to develop this new I can pattern. So here are 10 action steps, and these will all be in the podcast notes, the YouTube video notes, and we'll probably go over these topics this week in the Make Sense Academy. So the first one, the 10 action steps to increase your confidence and shift from can't to can. Here they are. Seek discomfort, number one. It's called voluntary discomfort, and it's a great way to build confidence over time. Seek discomfort. The 3 easiest ways to seek discomfort would be this: wake up earlier in the morning, exercise, and eat less. Those are the three most common and most effective, and they will create longevity in your life versions of seeking discomfort and voluntary discomfort. Eat less, exercise, and wake up earlier. Number two, count yourself in. And here's what I mean by that. Mel Robbins talks about this. There's a lot of people that talk about this. Count yourself in whenever you're feeling scared or I can't or anxious or anything like that. Count yourself in by saying 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then just do it. And then see that you can, right? You have to have a desire to do it. Number three, allow yourself to be brave for just 15 to 30 seconds. This happens to me when I do public speaking. I'll be like, I'm going to die, I'm going to fall down, and I'm going to vomit, and everybody's going to make fun of me. But I'm going to do it for 15 to 30 seconds. And what happens is that you will once again see that you can. Allow yourself to be brave today for 15 to 30 seconds in action. Okay. Number four, take your seat at the table. And I capitalize the word your. Take your seat at the table. Get engaged. Step up, step in, and take your seat. Nobody needs to invite you to sit at the table of success. It's not an invitation, right? You have a seat there, and it might be collecting dust, but it's your seat, and nobody else will ever take it. That's a farce. Your seat is there, and you can start to get towards that seat any day you want. So take your seat. It's your seat and nobody else's. You were born with the right to take that seat at the table of success. You were born that way. And somewhere along the line, people started telling you that you need to get invited or you don't deserve it. Somewhere along the line, you were led to believe that you needed permission to sit in that seat. Do it, take your seat, and see that you can. Number five, this is a big one. Cheer for others. And I'm going to cheer for all of you today that are with us, and especially those of you that are sharing it with others and those of you that join our community. I'm going to cheer for you. Help others shift from can't to can. Pay it forward. There's no better way to lock it in for yourself, and there's no greater feeling of confidence and certainty than when you have the ability to help other people. So help others shift from can to can't and celebrate the hell out of them rather than compare yourself to them. Celebrate others rather than comparing yourself to others, especially the ones that you perceive are doing better than you. They're not you. There's nobody that can do anything like you. If you see others succeeding rather than comparing yourself to them, celebrate them. Celebrate them. That's what number five is. Cheer for others, celebrate them. Celebrating others is actually a superpower, and I have to work on that all the time because I have comparative realities. It's a superpower that makes you super powerful and then allows you to see that you can. Number six, your scorecard of successes. This is a big one. Remind yourself and have somebody else remind you that something or some things that you've already achieved that you could be proud of, right? Sometimes we forget about that fact and we always move on to the next thing as if we're not done yet, right? Look at your scorecard for success. And then number seven, in connection with that, is celebrate your wins constantly. You see, if you don't celebrate your wins, right, then you'll never really value winning. Why would you want to spend all this time fighting to become a better version of you if it's not going to be celebrated? So take moments that highlight your accomplishment rather than take moments to highlight your accomplishments rather than quickly move to the next thing that you perceive as the next step. A lot of times the goal that you're setting right now, maybe it is even to work on your confidence. That goal might appear that it's like a finish line, but as soon as you even get close to reaching it, you'll be unsatisfied with it and you'll move to the next. If you want to be a millionaire, what you don't know is the day you become a millionaire will be the day that you decide you want to become a billionaire or whatever, or make $1,000,001. Okay. So celebrate. Number eight, choose an emotional state that overpowers your negative ones. Catch this one. For me, it's love. So if you think about that weak state of I can't, right? Look at that and ask yourself this question. What emotional state would I need to be in to overpower that? Like I said, for me, it's love. I like to help others win because I know what it's like to not feel loved and supported. That's my truth, right? That's why I've spent my life helping others win and loving others. So by placing myself in the emotional state of loving kindness, I feel higher levels of self-worth and improve my I can reality. So, what are you doing for a living? What are you doing with your time? Make sure that you're spending time in the emotional state that overpowers your negative state. Number 9, call your own bullshit. We're almost there. Two more. Call your own bullshit. Almost 100% of the time that you feel unconfident, insecure, or low self worth, those emotions are symptoms of your old story, the one that no longer applies. And you've just somehow brought them into your current reality. It's not your current story until you make your old story. So if you keep telling your old story, you might think that you're referring to it in the past, but you're bringing it into the present and you're making it your current story, which is actually a choice and an illusion. Even if you think that changing your story right now is an illusion, well, then I say choose your own illusion. The truth is that you have the unlimited potential right here in this moment for greatness. And you can make a decision right now to call yourself on your own bullshit. And that's a power move to just say, you know what, I'm a little bit full of shit about myself and this idea that I can't do things. And I'm using it as a hall pass and an excuse to get out of responsibility. Catch yourself inviting that problematic friend called your bullshit to your party. You don't want that person at your party anymore. They cause nothing but trouble. They don't play nice. So number 10, stop caring. Stop caring. You guys see me wear this shirt all the time. Breaking news, I don't care. Identify what it is that you want. Allow yourself to identify what it is that you want, why, what matters most to you in your life, and only allow yourself to place a focus and care, right? That's why I say I don't care. I do care, but not about stupid crap. I only care about things and people that are in support of what it is that I want. And I care less. I could care less about anything, and everybody else. That's what it means when I say care less. Stop caring about things that have nothing to do with what you want. And that's why I always say breaking news. I don't care about stuff that doesn't matter, stuff that I can't control, and stuff that is not in any way, shape, or form connected with my dreams. Stop caring. Okay. That includes my occasional thoughts that I have, and I had some yesterday. I don't care about those thoughts. I have them and I acknowledge them, but I don't care about them and I don't bring them into my present moment. I don't care about those thoughts and feelings of anxiety, depression, and low self-worth. I will have them, but it doesn't matter. They don't matter, and they don't in any way, shape, or form connect with what I want, so I don't care. Sorry. Thanks, but no thanks. So if this stuff resonates with you as we close, and you're feeling, those sensical circuits firing off like, you know what? Makes sense. This vibes with me. And something he said, is really connecting with me. The chances are you're going to just allow your day to swallow you up. But if it makes sense and your brain is starting to fire off and you want to actually do the work, which is a lot of fun, and lock it in. That's what my daughter says before she's getting ready for her jujitsu tournament. She says, I'm going to get locked in. If you want to lock this stuff in to the point where you will no longer even know that you're walking around in the presence of others as a confident I can person, well, then just come check out what I call our psychological safe haven, where we're helping the uprising of the sleepwalking masses. We've created this thing called the Make Sense Academy, and it's been created by my wife, myself, and our good friend Jules. And we've created this idea that where we have this daily routine and this repetition, everything that I've just said that we need to do, this daily routine in a structured community full of like-minded, supportive, inspirational people with the structure of courses and all of the work, but we do it all the time. We do it all the time. And it's like getting mentorship, support, and coaching, and it's all for $24 a month. Okay. And you get the collaboration of the community as well. So once again, if you're interested in that, just write the word community. We'll send you an example of that. We'll send you an invitation to it. It's $24 a month. And if it doesn't work for you, we'll give you your $24 back. But anyway, love and appreciate you all. This has been another Make Sense Mondays. I hope that you'll follow the podcast Make Sense with Dr. JC Doornick, which is moving to astronomical places. And if you're interested in getting in our newsletter, just go right now to Rise Up with Dragon and you'll find the ability to do that. Love and appreciate you all. Have an amazing day.